Somebody's Daughter is a true crime podcast brought to you by Origins Australia, supporting people separated by adoption. It contains distressing material that some listeners may find triggering and is unsuitable for children. The producers respect the traditional owners of the land on which it was recorded and pay their respects to Aboriginal elders, past, present and emerging.
The heady romance that blossomed between Cameron Horne and his high school sweetheart Mary was a real-life Romeo and Juliet love story with an equally tragic ending.
When the 20-year-old university student discovered the love of his life was expecting his baby, the lovebirds agreed they would marry and raise their love child together, living the dream on Sydney's northern beaches.
Sadly, those dreams came crashing down when 18-year-old Mary's strict Catholic father found out about the baby. In a fit of rage, he banished Cameron from Mary's life, and she spent her entire pregnancy locked in her bedroom, where she was told that unless she gave her baby up for adoption, the family would turn their backs on her.
Welcome, Cameron Horne. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for taking up the guy's side of it. We kind of the silent participant in all this, and the father's stories have been a bit neglected. And by the same token, I think a lot of fathers didn't account for themselves very well at the time, and probably later on as well.
Yeah.
So tell us your story.
Okay, well, let's go all the way back to November 79. So my girlfriend Mary we found out just after she'd done her HSC that she was pregnant. That wasn't such a major problem for us because we had planned to get married, and we were pretty sure that we'd found our life's partner, and we were very much deeply in love as teenagers could be. I was 20 at the time, and she was 18, and so. And we'd been going out for a couple of years, so it was a pretty established relationship. And, of course, when her father found out that she was pregnant, probably a couple of weeks later, he just went literally ballistic. He was a pharmacist, and he, very, very intelligent, but could not handle anything that didn't go the way that he had patented.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so his wife had a baby out of wedlock.
Oh, really?
So he saw himself as a saviour of this fallen woman, and he named his daughter Mary. So he obviously saw her in those terms.
And they were a good Catholic family, weren't they? They were a strong Catholic family.
Well, yeah. Yeah, they were a Catholic family, yes, Roman Catholic. And so he really had himself invested in her. And I think he really had a vision for her. And, of course, I came along and...
ruined that in his mind.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of expressions we use that I think we need to get out of our language. And one of them is that you got her pregnant. As far as I remember, she was there as well, and she was a willing participant. So as far as me getting her pregnant, it was the two of us, worked on that.
Yes.
And, and so her becoming pregnant just, in her late teens at the age of 18, just completely upended his world. And so he particularly sought to just sweep this under the carpet, I think, is what happened. And so not long after he found out, I think it was the week after he found out, Mary and I were going to an Elton John concert. I bought tickets to this Elton John concert. And that was the night she was supposed to tell me that we had to split up because he had decided that this whole thing was going to be swept under the carpet, and she was to have the child adopted. And she actually said to me on the night, "I'm supposed to tell you tonight that we're splitting up, but I just can't do it." So, that was the first time I said to her, look, we'll get through this. We'll do this somehow. We'll make this a family. We'll make this work out. And I thought once the child was born, he would calm down a bit and there's his grandchild and all that, but that's not what happened. So after that night, she got basically locked in her bedroom by her parents, and it was like a family vigil to keep her in there. Her brother was involved and the mother was involved, basically locking her in this room. And so I got a message to her via a friend who lived across the road, and she told her that I would come down to the side window. Mary had a little ventilation window on the side of her room, and so she would open that window, and every night for about 3 months I came down after work at about 11 o'clock and we'd hold hands through the window, and I'd stand out there in the rain and whatever other weather was thrown at me. So they lived on a precipice, and it got very windy and all the rest of it down there. And a few nights the neighbours drove into their garage and shone their headlights on me, and I thought, oh no, I'm going to get found out. And but they never said anything. And there I am with my hand through the window, and we'd pass letters to each other through the.
What do you think the father would have done if he'd caught you in that situation?
Well, at one time, I was actually at her house during the day. Her mother let me in, and he was supposed to be at work. Anyway, he must have come home for lunch or something. But anyway, the Mercedes comes screaming up the driveways, and almost drove straight through the garage. And Mary just said to me, "Cam, hide!" So I got sort of shuffled off into a room, and I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, this is a dead end. I'm sitting in a dead end, And then I heard him come through the back door, and there was just like World War III going on in that room, in the kitchen. And I heard a drawer. I heard them getting thrown against the fridge. I heard them screaming, trying to fight him off, I suppose. And by this stage, Mary's 7 months pregnant. And then I heard the drawer get pulled out of the drawer, and Mary just screamed. Even today, I can just hear it still. She just screamed to me, "Cam, run," like this. And so I just bolted. I got out the door and I got to the front door, and my hands wouldn't work. I couldn't get the front door open. And I probably took 2 steps across their lawn, jumped the fence, and I got to the car, and I was thinking, should I get the crowbar out of the back of the car and confront this guy in the street, or should I just take off? And should I say to my shame, I guess, I took off. I didn't even take the handbrake off the car. I got to the top of their street and I realised the handbrake was still on. So it's amazing how much detail I remember of all this. But I thought, he's not going to hurt them. But apparently I found out that night when we exchanged letters that he basically pinned her up against the wall, and the mother as well, and read them the riot act of some sort, and said they weren't, if they weren't going to go along his way, that they were no longer part of the family, and that it called me the son of Satan, sort of thing, and she was she was behaving like the devil, and that this child was the spawn of Satan and all this sort of stuff. So there was a lot of religious nonsense going on. So then, we were stuck to just passing letters through the window for 3 months. And one night I went down there. I ran a squash centre up in Chatswood, and when I closed up the centre, and I used to drive down, I drove from Chatswood down to Dee Why, where they lived. And I was coming down the hill, there's a very steep hill that comes down to the Roseville Bridge. And I'm probably doing, well over the speed limit coming down there, and my car suddenly threw itself into first gear and wouldn't come out of first gear. So I was stuck in first gear from Chatswood all the way to Dee Why, and this would have been the night of the 2nd of April 1980. And as a reason why I remember the date, because when I got there, the house was lit up like a Christmas tree, but the car wasn't in the garage. The garage was open, the car wasn't there. And I went around the house, walked around the house and, tried to sort of sneak around, try to see what was going on. And, of course, I just figured that she must have gone into labour. Mm-hmm. She was about 2 weeks early, actually, so it caught us a little bit on the hop. She never told me which hospital she was going to. So I went home and I thought, well, what am I going to do? What can I do, And I thought, well, do I ring every hospital in Sydney or what do I do? And so I just had to wait overnight. And then about 7:30, 7:45 the next morning, this friend...
Oh, yes, the one across the road, yep.
Rang us, and she'd seen Mary's brother on her way to school that morning, or she'd seen her in the morning. And, of course, he'd told her, and she rang me, and she told me that Rebecca had been born, because we'd already named our child. Mm-hmm. She told me which hospital she was in, which was St Margaret's at Darlinghurst. St Margaret's was one of the major adoption...
Yeah, it was.
Adoption hospitals. Oh, I rang the hospital and said, can I speak to her? And they said no, she was resting. Fair enough. But they said, well, who are you? And I said, well, I'm the father of the child. And they said to me, well, since you're not family, you can't visit until visiting hours, which was 2 o'clock or something, or midday or something. So since I'm not family, so it didn't, and it's funny, it didn't hit me at the time, but it hit me later when I sort of started dredging all this up again in the 90s. I'm not family.
I know.
How more closely related
to the child,
to someone in your hospital do you want to get? She's got 50% of my DNA. So anyway, I dutifully went in there at the designated time. And I remember turning the corner to go in the room, and there's the love of my life with our baby, and she's breastfeeding her, which was odd because in the process, I had been to the adoption agency a few times in the meantime, and they told us that if the baby was to be adopted, that she was not to breastfeed and all that. So she was breastfeeding, which indicated to me she decided she was going to keep our child. And I certainly was of that thought. And in my papers, I got my papers many years later, and in my papers it actually says Cameron wanted Mary to keep the child. Mm-hmm. So it's there explicitly what my wishes were. And, of course, Cameron wanted to keep Mary as well. So while I was in there that first day, and people say, oh, well, the adoptive parents, they're the ones who changed the pooey nappy. Well, no, I'm sorry. I was pretty much first person to change a pooey nappy for that particular child, and did so for the coming week. And so on that first day, Mary's mother came in part of the way through the time we were there. And she just went off like a poker machine that did a jackpot, She was just, you can't be here, and she's just babbling like flat out. And then while she was there, the phone rings, and it's the father it's Mary's father on the phone, and I could hear him screaming down the phone. I was on the other side of the room. I could hear him screaming down the phone. So Mary and I moved to one side of the room, and we were sitting there like knee to knee and our foreheads touching, and she said to me, Cam, I want this child to be Rebecca Horn. I want that so much. And I said, yes, so do I. We'll do it somehow. Mm-hmm. And while this other phone call was going on. And so they were the things we were saying over and over and over. I took her some roses that day.
You were hands-on, though. You were being the baby's dad. You were fulfilling the role that you wanted.
We were bathing her and, holding her. And it was 1980s, so it's a little bit different to the late 60s where the child was whisked off to the nursery and never seen, and, you were coerced into signing the consent papers on the promise of getting to see your baby and things like that. That happened to my cousin. But they had other ways of coercing.
They did.
And, it was much more subtle by then. So anyway, to get to some of the highlights or lowlights, her mother went crazy on that occasion. And Mary and I, gave each other our promises. But about 5:30 that night, some friends of my family came to visit her. And as I said, Mary was on the second floor on a very busy street. They could hear her screaming for help from the road as they were coming towards the building. And so they ran upstairs. There was a guy and a man and a woman involved. They ran upstairs and went into the room. They just followed the screams. And they went into the room, and there was Mary's father sitting on the bed over the top of her, slapping her and hitting her with a prayer book and, screaming at her. And when these friends of ours came in, friends of my family came in, he just looked at them like, the scum of the earth, and walked out. Oh, no, actually, the male friend grabbed him and pulled him off the bed, and many years later he told me that he read him the right act and said, you just get out of here and calm down, because they knew Mary very well. And so Mary's father went outside the door and was pacing up and down the corridor while my family friends were visiting. And when they left, they hung around outside the door for a little while to just make sure everything was all right.
Yeah, make sure he didn't do it again.
And and the father went straight back in, and so.
And this is in a hospital. This is in a hospital where she has just delivered a baby.
This is in the maternity ward of St Margaret's Hospital.
Yep.
She delivered the baby at about 3:30 that morning.
Exactly.
And this is 5:30, the same day that she delivered
Same day, okay.
the
So
child.
this was his reaction to the birth of the child, was to physically assault her in a pub. Also, the fact that no one came to her assistance is rather interesting from the hospital.
Well, and also the fact that they'd said, well, you're not family, so we've got to, police your comings and goings.
Yes.
But they allowed this to happen, yeah. So
yes.
I kept going backwards and forwards to seeing her, and with my car was in getting repaired, so I didn't have that. So I was on buses and stuff, getting in there, and and one time I walked in, and there's Helen Dillon, who's the adoption worker from Catholic Adoption Agency, with all these papers spread out on the bed. And I looked at her and I said, Mary, what are you doing? And this woman just looked at me. And Mary said, well, these papers will allow me to have another month to decide what I'm going to do.
Okay.
So that's how it was being sold to her.
Right.
Yeah, sign up and you get a month if you want to change your mind.
Okay, right.
Yeah. And the adoption worker had the temerity to pick up the pen and point it at me and say, well, you can sign as well if you like. And so I picked up the papers to say, look what they are. And I said, Mary, these are an adoption consent form. Okay, so I said to her, we're not signing this. And I had actually asked the Helen Dillon previously, how do I stop this? We're going along with this charade at the moment just to keep Mary's father quiet. But this isn't happening. All right, so how do I stop this? And she said to me, you can't stop it. The decision is the sole responsibility of Mary, which 25 years later I found out was a complete lie. And they know it was a lie. But this whole business of women with a sole and in ex-nuptial situations, women being the sole arbiters of the fate of their child, is completely unsupported by the law. Completely. And actually I showed, when I was doing a submission, I did 7 submissions to the New South Wales inquiry, and I was working for a lawyer at the time, Peter Breen, and he came over to me and looked over my shoulder and said, oh, what are you working on? And I showed him, and he went white. And he said, you know what this means? I said, yeah, I know what it means. And he said, will you tell me what it means? I said, there would not be a single adoption in the history of New South Wales that is proceeded according to the law. Not one. Not one, because of the role that was enshrined in the law for the fathers. And the point of the fathers, from the adoption workers' point of view, was to get them out of the way because they were a roadblock. The fathers were the roadblock to the adoption proceeding. And it was the responsibility of the social workers, and I'm talking about the hospital social workers and the adoption so-called social workers, to go and find those fathers and drag them back even if they were unwilling, and I'm willing to admit plenty of them were. Plenty of them ran off for the hills. But the legislation says to go and find that guy, bring him back and hit him up for maintenance. That's number one. And there's a whole range of other things that he is supposed to answer for. But they just... And they keep saying, the men got away with it. The men got away with it. I didn't get away with anything, you know, and people say to me, well, for a start, I didn't sign anything.
Right.
Okay? So, and I should have. I was supposed to sign that consent if it was going to happen. The combination of three pieces of legislation, the Child Welfare Act, the Adoption Act, and the Child Equality of Status Act, stated that I was a guardian, I was a parent, I was an ex-nuptial parent, I had the same rights as a married father over that child, and so and that was precedented numerous times in the courts.
And were you planning, Cameron, can I just ask you, you were willing to support Mary and the baby, and were your family prepared to have Mary and the baby go and live there? Was that true?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So my father had assigned a room in our house.
Yes,
my parents were divorced. So it was that was a blight on my background, according to
Mary's father.
Mary's father, But my father had assigned a room. I wasn't particularly happy with the room, and I wanted the baby in my room. But there's a few caveats on my parents' support that I will place, and I'll tell you about that as well. So my dad said, he said to me, I remember his words, he said to me, look, I'm too old to be having a baby in my house, but if that's what it's going to take, that's what it's going to have to take, right? And he said, look, Mary's a nice girl, I really like her, and so he was really on board. And so that was to be the arrangement. My mother, on the other hand, my mother is fabulously wealthy. She, at the time, was running a business of... doing stagecraft seminars. And what I really needed at the time was I needed her to square up with some bucks for lawyers. And she was busy doing this other stuff. And also, I got, stupidly, at 20 years old, I got blindsided thinking, well, this isn't going to happen. And then as we're getting more and more serious, the train was being railroaded down that path, I did actually go to the Chamber Magistrate at Manly Court to try and do something about Mary's incarceration and to do something about, and to sort of say, well, look, is there any legal way I can stop this? Now, as it turns out, there were a dozen legal ways I could have stopped this, but to this overworked Chamber Magistrate, I was just some
annoying kid,
who'd got his girlfriend pregnant, and he didn't give me the advice that I needed. But there are, I now know there were several courses of action. One of which is a clause in the Adoption Act which states anyone with an interest in the well-being of the child can have their name added to the adoption proceedings for the express purpose of opposing the adoption. That's pretty much verbatim what that clause says. That's the New South Wales Adoption Act, 1967. So I could have availed myself of that act.
And they had no idea.
Margaret MacDonald and Helen Dillon can quote that act word for word, and they did not tell me that.
And these are the social workers, right? One from the hospital, one from the adoption agency. And
Maria Puddle was the social worker at St Margaret's Hospital. All these women, well, first of all, they have a professional duty.
Duty of care, yeah.
Professional duty of care to know that act and what it says if they're dealing with the adoption of children, first of all. And even if they don't know exactly what the Adoption Act says, and I know they did, but if they didn't, they have a duty to know to either go look it up, or especially if someone's asking them the question, which I did repeatedly.
Ahead, Cameron discovers both the baby and Mary have left the hospital. As it turns out, Mary is then locked in her bedroom for 30 days, just the right amount of time to prevent her from changing her mind about giving up the child for adoption. We also learn of a chance reunion with Mary, but one that still needs to be kept secret from her conservative family. The Somebody's Daughter podcast. Thanks to Origins Australia, supporting people separated by adoption. Let's go back to when Mary's had the child, and you said, I do believe you said that you were very hands-on and you had the child for a week. Is that right?
Over 10 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
And through that time, I'm imagining you sneaking into the hospital each time, because obviously you don't want to be around Mary's parents. You don't want to be. Were they aware that you were going in there?
To this day, I don't really know. I know, obviously, the first time. And the hospital said it was Mary's decision as to who came and visited her.
Okay.
And she had made the decision that she wanted me to come along. She had said during her labour she almost strangled her mother to tell her to ring me to get me there, and they never did.
And you'd imagine, apart from the fact that Dad was in there assaulting her to put pressure on her to go along with the adoption, that he probably wasn't really bothering going there too much anyway. He didn't approve of the baby. He wanted it gone.
Yes. Well, I don't know how often they went in. I do know this, that at least twice when I went in there, the adoption worker was in there with her papers.
Okay.
Okay, and I stopped her.
Yeah.
Okay. And I actually said to the adoption worker and to Mary at the time, I said, look, this is wrong. This is completely wrong, and this has to stop.
And they were supposed to be, weren't they? I don't know if the law was the same in the 80s, but weren't they supposed to wait at least 5 days legally before they could approach a mother and mention the word adoption?
Well, I can tell you that they were approaching her before.
I know they were.
5 days.
But they shouldn't have been.
Well, not necessarily before the 5 days. They were approaching her before the baby had been
born.
But they were not supposed to. They were not supposed to mention that word.
Yeah. So I believe that they were coming to the house, and they certainly. I assume it was probably after the 5 days. That was the first time that I caught Helen Dillon in there. I mean, she would have been in there, 5 to 9, the first day. That first day she could get in there. So anyway, as I said, fortunately I got in there and stopped it. I did that twice. Obviously there's a third time she's come in. I wasn't able to get there. I wasn't there at the time. And somehow they coerced her into signing. I don't know what they did, what they said, how they did it. But anyway, the moment she signed, she was whisked out of the hospital and then locked up in her room again for a month.
Right.
And so I know that because I rang incessantly, trying to find out. And it's the other thing too, they kidnapped my child. Exactly. I didn't know, and this is that's not in the Adoption Act. That's not in the anywhere that says, oh, you have to take the baby away to foster care, So, and I've read my daughter's medical papers, and the moment Mary was out of the hospital, all of a sudden my daughter's having diarrhea and incessant crying and won't sleep and other vomiting.
I've heard that a lot.
Which she didn't have any of that.
Yeah.
She didn't have any of that.
She was a settled, contented baby before that. And I understand that she had been given DES, which is the drug diethylstilbestro, which is a carcinogenic drug that we now know is linked to all sorts of cancers, vaginal cancers and endocrine-type cancers.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is she was being injected with stilbestrol, and she was breastfeeding.
That's the point.
What?
Yeah, she was breastfeeding the baby,
and she was being breastbound.
Yeah.
And she was being breastbound.
And she was still making so much milk.
So
she was breastfeeding.
Who was making this decision? Was it her being confused? Was it the father?
I think the same people who made the decision not to send someone into her room when she's getting beaten up by her father.
Exactly. And a lot of those women were
these are medical
breastbound.
decisions.
Yeah, they are medical decisions.
These are medical
yes.
decisions.
And that's why a lot of prem babies were were breastfed. There were breast milk. Mothers, even when they were bound and given still bistro, were still making a surplus milk. So they were using it to feed the prem babies. Yes, you just have to wonder how many people were exposed to that drug, really.
So, and as I said, this was 1980. This was long after stilbestrol had been struck off.
No, it's still being used.
Struck off the list in the United States. They're still using it out here. And as I said, it was 1980. So that's why there was a slightly slacker set of procedures in the hospital. And there seemed to be a battle amongst the nurses, because some nurses were, being a Catholic hospital, some nurses were encouraging Mary to take the baby. It's your child, time for a bath, time for a feed, time,
So she was bonding.
Nurse. So there was a time of flux, but
you were both bonding with that baby, weren't you? Both of you were bonding with that baby.
Well, there's, first day, I wrote a song actually called Rebecca. Yeah, there's a line in the chorus that says, see your eyes following my voice across the room. And the moment I walked into that room, I'm sure she recognised my voice. And then as I walked, and I said to Mary, look at this. And we put it back in the bassinet. And I was walking around the room and she kept going, following me around the room with her eyes as I spoke. Yeah, so there's all this going on. It sounds kind of silly, but it's important.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, they're the memories. They're the memories you have of Rebecca.
So how did you find out that they'd gone, that the baby had gone and that Mary had gone home? How did you find out?
I think I rang and they said she'd gone, or I rang to speak to her and they said she'd gone.
Okay.
So I go home and I'm just in complete despair, trying to get through to Mary, I've been cut off from every angle. I've been told by numerous people, including the chamber magistrate, the people at the adoption agency, who I assumed would know what they were talking about, that I had no say in this matter. So I'm just sitting there basically watching the calendar and clicking off 30 days. 30 days comes and goes.
Well, of course, they kept her locked up, so she couldn't change her mind.
Right, okay. So that was a 30 days.
The waiting period, yeah.
Yeah, just to clarify that, there's the period of changing her mind for 30 days. That's where they put Mary in the house.
And that's why she wasn't allowed out.
Right.
She was put back in her room because I was ringing constantly. Yeah. I went back to the house and tried to get the window open. That had been nailed shut.
They nailed the window.
Yeah, so that had been nailed shut. So I was tapping on a window and I couldn't hang around the house too much because they knew now how we had been conversing, and so they were pretty vigilant. Yeah, they kept her in, and her room was right next to where the phone was. And a few times when I rang, I could hear fighting over the phone, and I could hear that she had beads hanging down on her on her bedroom door. And I could hear the beads bashing, and I could hear the phone being, fought over, and then it'd be slammed down again. So this went on for about 30 days, and so on the 31st day, I get a phone call, and I didn't want to get out of bed. I think I did actually stay in bed the whole day and just, in a fit of depression, crying and whatever. And I spent 30 days basically. The various episodes of my life, I don't think I've got any tears left. I seriously, But anyway, on that particular 30 days of just bawling my eyes out, and then, of course, straight after that, on the 31st day, literally, I got a phone call from Mary, and she said, I've got a job just round the corner from your place. I'll come down to your place for lunch. Right? So she had a job in the ANZ Bank, which was just up the hill and round the corner from where I lived in Balgala. I hear there's banging on the door. I open the door, there's Mary, and we just held each other. That first time we just held each other like for an hour. And then when it came time for her to go back to work, she said, I opened the door and she sort of looked kind of sheepish out the door, gave me a kiss goodbye and ran and took off, and I just took off back to work. And then on one occasion, so we're doing this pretty much every day for the first few days that she's had this new job. Anyway, on one occasion, after about 3 days, a car went past my house and she just screamed, "Oh, it's Dad, he's come to get me, he's found out we're seeing each other." And she just went berserk and started running around the house. "I've got to hide somewhere, hide me. And I was trying to catch her. And she was, going into jumping in the bathroom and jumping in cupboards and all sorts of things. And I grabbed her and I was sort of wrestling her. And I said, "Look, there's no one out there. There would have been a bang on the door by now if it had been anyone come to get you." And she, so I'm sort of wrestling with her a bit, and she just curled up and underneath the table in the fetal position. Just silent. And I got under the table with her and just held her, and nothing was said, and held her. And then, 45 minutes or whatever time it was, by the time it was time for her to go back to work, she sort of calmed down and got up just like nothing had happened.
Sounds like post-traumatic stress, doesn't it?
Yeah. And that's why I'm describing this, because that's what we now call it.
Yeah.
But this was just a situation I was dealing with and that she was dealing with. So she got up and she said, "Go and check outside, make sure there's no one there." And I said, "There's no one there, but I'll go and check." So I went out and checked. I said, "Look, coast is clear, there's no one there." I looked up and down the road, and she said, "Well, walk to the gate with me." So I walked to the gate with her and she kissed me goodbye and she said, "I've got to go back to work now." And she kissed me goodbye. And it was at that point that I found out she was sprinting, like flat strap, sprinting probably it'd be 300 metres up this hill to Sydney Road, and then it would have been about another 300 metres down the road. She was just running flat out to go back to work so she wouldn't be seen.
Did you talk about the child? I mean, obviously she's erratic and everything else. What was that conversation?
That's a good question. I don't know. I actually can't remember. I guess we must have.
Did she offer an explanation, or didn't even talk about the adoption? Didn't talk about the adoption at all?
Not much. No. She was just trying to be boyfriend and girlfriend again.
Yeah.
And I've got to be honest, I can't really remember what we must have talked about it.
But there's that grief between you, isn't there? There's that loss, that enormous grief that you both have felt, even if you didn't verbalise it, would have been huge.
Yeah. And I think the enormity of these other events that have happened around that, that's a really interesting question, because I haven't actually thought, what did we talk about in those times?
So is it just as if it didn't happen to her or didn't happen to you? Like the both of you, I would have thought at some stage.
Yeah.
Because you obviously you've set the timeline for a couple of years.
Yeah, well, I certainly did, but I don't remember what we said.
Yeah, okay.
And so I don't want to say, we said this, we said that, and all that. She said, one thing I will say that I do remember, so we must have talked about it, and I must have asked her, what did they do to get you to sign?
Yeah.
And she said, it was when you let me down. So somehow they were able to pin the, the reason for having to sign on me having let her down or not being there at a certain time or whatever. Now, I'll just go back to the roses. I said to her, when I gave her the roses in the hospital, I said to her, if you sign those things, I said, those roses will outlive anybody in this room. And they did. Mary told me that when she left the room, she left the roses there and they were still, so this is 10, 12 days after I'd taken them in, they were still huge and blooming and colourful, and they hadn't, and I said, I said to her, these roses are a real symbol of how much I love you, and they will not die. All right, and they didn't die before she left that room. So I remember that being said. But there, at some stage, I remember her saying to me, "It was when you let me down," and I said, "Like what?
Yeah.
When did I let you down?" And she just said, "You weren't there." And I thought, she said at one stage, she said to me in the hospital, she said, I can do this as long as you're always there with me.
Right, okay.
So at some stage, maybe I missed 2 days going in there seeing her, I don't know. But so that was, I do remember saying that.
Yeah.
I do remember that being part of a conversation later.
But there was a time, wasn't there, where she ended the relationship? She, out of the blue, ended it, yeah?
Yeah, so that was, okay. In about July that year, and it was funny, I knew this was coming. It's funny. That day, I remember it clearly. I remember going out to the letterbox and I knew what was going to be in the letterbox. So I went out to the letterbox and I when I spoke to you before, I couldn't remember if it would been posted, but I remember now it had been hand delivered.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
It didn't have postmark on it or anything. It just had my name on it. Went out to the letterbox and there's a letter from her, and I can still pretty much quote it word for word. It said, "Dear Cam, last night I told my parents that I've still been seeing you, and they told me I had to pack my belongings and get out of the house right now. If I was to continue seeing you, I had to pack my bags and get out of the house right now. After all that's happened, I couldn't stand to lose my family as well. So I'm going to have to say goodbye. Time will heal the wounds." I think she said, "I love you." And that was that. So I don't think I even bothered to put the letter down or go back. I went straight up to the bank and joined her queue up to the teller. I've got more front than Grace Brothers. And she just looked like petrified. And I obviously had the letter in my hand. And I said, I got to the front of the queue and she said, "You can't be here, you can't be here." And I said, "Can we have lunch out the back?" Helen Totem, we've got to talk, So we did have lunch and she said, yeah, okay. And I think I stayed up there just waiting for her. And so we had lunch, we had a bit of a chat. And so after that we continued to have lunch for a while, for months, And I think it was towards the end of 1981. So that was maybe about July or August 1980 that I got that letter. And we were still seeing each other for lunch right up till pretty much almost the beginning of 1982. And so there was still, at least a friendship going on there, and we were still in contact with each other.
So, but you weren't in a romantic relationship at this point. So
no. So she was getting involved with this other guy, and we used to wear bracelets. Even still, then we were still wearing bracelets with each other's names on them. I had Mary's bracelet, and she had my bracelet. I don't think she was wearing it anymore, but I was still wearing her bracelet. And I said to her, "Mary, do you want your bracelet back?" And she said, "Yes, Cam, I do." So that was like giving back the engagement ring in a way. So I gave her back the bracelet that day, and it was. I think I said to you, it was just like it was like that it was like that Wendy Matthews song. I walked out of the Totem shopping centre, and it was the clearest sky you've ever seen. And I remember thinking, this isn't right, it's supposed to rain. I thought it would rain on a day like today. But anyway, it wasn't raining, it was as bright as. And the next day I went back, I got in touch with her, and the next day I took some things back to her that I still had. I still had a photo of her, Ringo Starr's song Photograph. That drives me nuts as well. I still had a photograph on my drawers at home. So I took some things back to her. She gave me some things that I'd given her. And that was that. August 82, I rang, and I said, "Can I speak to Mary, please?" And they said, "Oh, she doesn't work here anymore."
Oh.
And I said, "Oh, has she gone to another branch? Where she, have you got a forwarding number, or can I leave a message?" And they said, "Oh, no, Mary's on maternity leave."
Oh, God.
Imagine.
Oh, God.
So I'm standing there with a phone in my hand, and my dad's wife walked in and looked at me and she said, "Cam, what's the matter?" Because I'd just gone like a ghost. And I said, "Mary's on maternity leave." And she, "What?" So I jumped in the car, drove round I thought, what the hell's happened here? Has all this happened again and they've allowed her to keep the baby? Or what's going on? Yeah, so I went round to the house, and her room was at the front of the house. So I sort of looked in the window. All that had been changed. All the furniture and everything had been changed. So it looks like she's not living there anymore. And Mary got married in the church that is like, I don't know, about 50 metres from where I was living.
Oh, my God.
You didn't know.
How long had she been married?
Well, I'm not quite sure. And funnily enough, a couple of weeks later, I was driving home on a Sunday morning from touch football, and walking up to that church, I'm driving down the road, and that's Mary. Mary's going up to church. Oh. So I drove my car over the median strip on Condamine Road, spun it round, and I literally almost drove up the steps of the church. There's parishioners falling out of the way, and I'm still in my touch football gears, smelly and sweaty. And I see Mary going in, and she sits right in the middle. All right, so I just went in and slid up the pew, and she's just staring straight ahead. And I said, I had a nickname for her. I'll say Mares. And I said, "Hello, Mares." And she said, "Yeah, I thought it was you." And because she just hightailed it, she raced. She thought he wouldn't dare come into
the church.
She knew me, but she knew me. She didn't know me that well. So I sat there and I said, "Look," I said, "if you're happy, that's okay, I said, "Of course, I'm going to miss you, and I'm lost without you, but if you're happy." And she didn't say anything. So I said, "So I guess it's goodbye." And then the next Sunday, I had some other stuff that was hers. I found some other stuff, so I cut her off the path. So I knew which pathway she would have taken to get to church. So I met her along the pathway and gave her these things that I still had of hers, and that was the end of it. And basically, so I didn't see her or speak to her or anything for, another 18 years.
Wow. Next, with changes to laws in the 90s, information becomes available, allowing Cameron to begin the search for his long-lost daughter in earnest. But as you'll hear, it isn't something that always goes to plan. You're listening to Somebody's Daughter, Someone Else's Child.
The Somebody's Daughter podcast. Thanks to Origins Australia, supporting people separated by adoption.
With your daughter, the laws started to change, didn't they, to allow contact with, you could contact through adoption support groups and things. The laws started to change where you were entitled to information. So is that when you started to look for your daughter?
So I was working for 2CH, and I was in the creative department. And on our fax machine, This is 1996, either 95, 96. On our fax machine, a news fax came through. Now, it's supposed to go to the newsroom, but they'd sent it to the wrong number and sent it to the creative room. And up pops Ron Dyer's name, Minister for Social Services. And as it's coming through my fax machine, headline, changes to adoption law. Or changes to adoption contact laws. So, this is interesting. And it wasn't supposed to come to me. This is another one of these strange things that happen. So up comes the fax. And I read it, and it says that adopted children can now can get identifying material about their, now I hate using this term, but for their birth parents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I call them dispossessed parents. That's my terminology for them, but the language in this paper from Ron Dyer saying, birth parents. So I went, okay, this is a problem, because I thought, well, if she goes and gets her, and also said they can get their original birth certificate. I thought, if our daughter, Rebecca, goes and gets her original birth certificate, it'll have the address, and I don't want her going to that address and copping the treatment.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, well, so I inquired of birth, deaths and marriages, and I said, am I on the birth certificate? And they said no. And this will be a very common story, I would imagine, that you've come across. They said no, and I said, what? How could I not be on the birth certificate? I was in there, I saw Mary write my name on all the forms and signing them off. And they said, well, it was procedure, or, that they didn't put the father's name. So she's going to get a birth certificate now.
And think she has no father. Yeah.
And says father unknown. And I thought, this isn't happening.
Yeah.
So I went through it. So at that point I said, okay, how do I get my name on the birth certificate? And so I had to contact Mary again and get a stat dec from her, which I did. Very painful conversation with her husband, and which she dutifully did the stat dec. And so I got my name put on the birth certificate. Great. Right, so that's one thing. And I had a copy of it. So this is 1996, and I kind of had to wait. So I'm counting down the days, basically. And seriously, April 3 at 8 a.m., April 3, 1998, at 8 a.m., I was standing with my face pressed up against the glass doors of birth, deaths and marriages at, is it in Ultimo or down near Chinatown in Sydney? And as soon as the doors opened, I was in there. Had to pay my money, I think it was a couple of $100, $150 or something, to get a copy of her amended birth certificate. Mm-hmm. So it was a couple of weeks later, it comes in the mail. And, it's sitting on the kitchen counter when I come upstairs, when I get home. And everyone's looking at me. My wife's looking at me, this has arrived today. And she was okay with it at that stage. I said, well, and she knew what I was doing, that I started these proceedings. So I open it up, and now I've got a name. There's her name on this birth certificate. Now I've got a name. So, and I'm working at Parliament House by this stage. I was doing half my time at half the week at 2CH and half the week at Parliament House. So I'm working at Parliament House, and so I race into Parliament House next day or whatever, go through the rolls, the electoral rolls, and I find all these names with the same surname in the town, and all these relatives, and I've got the whole thing. It's all there in front of me. I'm going, and then I cross-match that. There was no internet at the time, but as a parliamentary researcher, you've got access to a lot of interesting information. So I cross-match that with my access to phone books and whatever else. Now I've got phone numbers of all sorts of people, of her aunties and uncles and her adoptive parents and blah-de-blah-de-blah. It's all going on. So I sit there and I go, I've got everything. I've got everything I need here. I'm sitting on the library floor and not the basement, the first floor of Parliament House, with all these papers all over the floor. And so I get talking to this relative, get all this information. And so I rang and I said, oh, look, my name's Cameron Horn. I'm a parliamentary researcher at New South Wales Parliament House. Just checking that these people, I said their names, are the adoptive parents. Yeah, and she said, oh, yes, she turned 18 just recently. Yes, that all makes sense. And I said, yeah, that's fine, that's great, thank you. Hung up. So then in the afternoon I thought, stuff it, I'm going to ring her back and have a bit more of a chat. So I rang back and I said, look, there's something I didn't tell you this morning that, is a bit different and I need to talk to you about it. She said, yeah. And I said, I'm actually Rebecca's natural father. She said, oh, okay. And I said, can I have a bit of a chat with you? She said, yeah. She said, anything to get away from the ironing. So I had this long chat with her, got all sorts of information, and found out that she went to St Vincent's private school.
Oh, yes, you told me this.
I told you this story, yeah.
Yeah.
She goes to St Vincent private school. So, and I was downstairs in a private room making this phone conversation. So after spoke to her for about 45 minutes, went back upstairs to my desk, my actual office. I thought, St Vincent's school, and I took the old Gregory's the UBD off the shelf, the maps of Sydney. Where's St Vincent's school? Where's St Vincent's school? I look it up, and I look out my window, and there's St Vincent's school.
From the window of his office.
Oh, my gosh.
It's directly across from where I was sitting on the top floor of New South Wales Parliament House, across the domain, across the freeway, St Vincent's School.
You're looking right at it every day.
So I wrote her a letter. And the letter turns up at their house up in Cowra. She was living. I sent it to adoptive parents and I said, this is who I am. I've looked her up. I found you. But I only, I'd love a reunion. I'd love to meet her, but only if that's what she wants. Mm-hmm. So apparently what happened, and I found out later, what happened was this letter turned up. So her mother came out, her adoptive mother came out with the letter crying. And they all looked at each other, and later on her adoptive mother told her, we've got a letter from your natural father or birth father or whatever they want to call me, PF, and showed her the letter. So then I'm at work. By this time I was working at Mix 106.5. I'm in my office at Mix 106.5 this day, and I get a phone call from my wife. She says, we've got a letter back. I said, oh, okay. She said, do you want to read it when you get home, or do you want me to read it over the phone? So she read me this letter, and it was really the most wonderful, beautiful, lovely letter. And I'm bawling my eyes out at work, and people, like, my office was all glass and on a thoroughfare backwards and forwards, and people are all looking at me like, what is going on in there? And I'm bawling my eyes out. And so she read me this letter, and yeah, she'd love to meet up and so on. So we exchanged a few more letters, and I think in a couple of those letters we sorted out, okay, if you want to, ring me at this time, here's my number, and no mobile phones at the time, ring me at this time on this date and we can have a chat. Mm-hmm. So sure enough, I think it was 4:30 on a Sunday or something. Sure enough, 4:30 on that particular Sunday, the phone rings, and my wife says to my other two kids, let's give Dad a bit of privacy, and they shuffled out of the room, saying actually in the same room I'm in now. And of course, I pick up the phone, said hello, and there's just silence. And I said, Rebecca, is that you? And she said, yeah, it's me. And we spoke for like 2 hours, at least 2 hours, probably longer, that first phone call. And I can't really remember what we spoke about. maybe just general stuff about her life and so on. A couple of things I do remember. And, of course, I'd received some photos and so on of her in the letters leading up to this. And so I was filling her in with some of the gaps of some of her birth and all that sort of thing. And I said, look, while I've got the chance, it's kind of the first chance I've had for 18 years, but, you know, I'm not going to miss this chance. But I want you to know, because this is where we're about to hang up, I said, I want you to know that you were born of a really, really loving relationship. There was nothing sordid or anything. I said, Mary and I had been going out for a couple of years, for at least 2 years, and we intended to get married, but just things didn't go our way, and you know, here we are where we are. But I want you to know that you were born of a really, really beautiful, loving relationship. And she was silent again. She said, thank you for telling me that. Thank you. So we met up down underneath the Harbour Bridge, and I chose that spot specifically because that's a place, that whole precinct is a place that's been very significant in my life. And so I met her down there. And it was funny because I said to her before we met that I want to give you the biggest hug I've ever given anybody. But when I met her, there was so much anger coming out of her eyes, I actually didn't want to hug her.
Why anger?
What had happened in the meantime, so we'd had a number of phone calls, we'd had a lot of letters, and things were starting to go a bit, before we'd met, as we'd already organised to meet, things were starting to go a bit awry.
Okay.
And but not to the point where, you know, we'd said we were going to meet, so we went through with it. Interestingly, when I met Rebecca, it was like it was like meeting my mother.
Oh wow.
She's got a very similar personality to my mother from the short time I've spent with her.
Yeah.
And so is my other daughter, Emma. So anyway, met up with Rebecca under the Harbour Bridge, and so my mother was an opera singer, and I spent a lot of time in the opera house when I was a kid. So the opera house is right across the water there. I was a swimmer. I spent a lot of time at North Sydney Pool doing backstroke, looking up at the Harbour Bridge. So that's why that precinct, and there's Luna Park right there as well. That was a place that Mary and I used to go a lot. So that was why I chose that precinct. So we spent the day together, and it was getting pretty. It wasn't particularly comfortable. I actually didn't want to hug her when I first met her, but because I said that I was going to, I thought, if I don't, she'll think there's something wrong with her or something. Anyway, so but there's so much anger and fire coming out of her eyes. So we had that meeting. My wife was there, and her adoptive brother was there. So we couldn't really talk through any issues, couldn't really clear the air on a few things. And so things just festered a bit. And so I said, look, I'll come and see you for lunch, or I'll come and see you after school, and we can just go for coffee somewhere up, you know. And I went 2 or 3 times to do that, and they were really, really monosyllabic events. And then it came to a point where I thought, this is really going bad. You know, there's something not right here. So I was in turmoil as well, and a lot of the stuff that I'd gone through. So part of the problem was Rebecca doesn't remember her birth and the events around it. I do. Okay? So all that trauma and all that horror came back in a flood 18 years later. I'm still trying to run two jobs. I'm still trying to be a family man. I'm still trying to be a husband. I'm commuting backwards and forwards. I've got this fledgling relationship with a person I don't know who's really, really important to me. She's starting to get... I suppose she's got all sorts of stuff going on in her life. She's in her HSC year. So it was all too much for anybody. Anyway, I was trying to get, and I couldn't get documents. I couldn't get any answers from the adoption agency. They were playing games as well. And I was getting pretty crapped off with them. And so I decided I'm going to go out to Croydon and confront them face to face. And I'd set up a meeting. So I rang, and I was trying to ring Rebecca over and over and over, and she never answered the phone. Anyway, after a few times, she ended up answering the phone at the school. And because I'd ring and they'd say, Rebecca's not here, or, there's always an excuse. So one time she actually picked up the phone, so I got her. And we had a really nasty conversation, okay, mostly from her side. And she said, and I've spoken to the agency and they think you're weird as well. I said, weird? What do you mean weird? What do you mean? What do they say? She said, I'm not going to say, I don't want to talk about it, but you're weird. You're not going to, they say you're weird. So I said, well, that's interesting. So I'm going out to see them tomorrow. So I'm going to ask them about weird. Okay. And I said, well, look, obviously you're pretty upset, pretty charged up. I said, look, and in the meantime, one of the meetings as we parted, I went to walk away. This is about a week before this, and this was the thing that set her off. As we parted, I turned and I said, oh, by the way, she said, yeah. I said, I love you. And she shuddered. She shuddered and just looked at the floor and walked away, right? No answer. And I spoke to, do you know you guys know who Di Welfare is?
Yeah, she was the head of Origins. She started Origins. Yeah,
I spoke to Di Welfare just after that, and she said, oh, don't ever say that. Don't ever tell them you love them, right? So this was one of the first father-daughter reunions that have really ever happened in, I'm sure they happened had happened previously, but this was in this whole environment of, a parliamentary inquiry, scrutiny of adoption.
Yes.
I was right in the middle of that as well at Parliament House. So this reunion was happening right in the middle of me having to do research into all this. So then I have this phone call. I said, well, listen, you hang up when you feel you need to, and the phone was just slammed.
In the end, was that reunion process halted?
Yes.
Did you give up on it?
Did I give up on it?
No. Was one party or another not successful?
The last words I've spoken to her face to face were, "I love you."
Right.
Okay. And the last, and then I did try to have one phone call with her in 2004, but she threw the phone on the floor and ran away.
Wow.
I send her a birthday card every year. I don't even know if it gets to her. I've heard nothing. We had a medical scare in my family, a genetic medical scare, which I contacted her about.
Yep.
And she barely wanted to know about that.
And did she ever meet Mary?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so from your point of view now, you're a dad of how many kids did you say you have?
I've got two others, yeah.
Two others. And so your life has taken a different direction. That whole severing of those ties for you all that time ago, do you still feel that it's something you ever get over?
No. It gets worse.
Yeah.
Because you learn more about what you've lost.
Yeah.
Other things come into your life. As I said before, my second daughter, or my other daughter, has been profoundly affected by this.
Yeah.
And I'll say this on tape in case she's ever listening. If anyone on this planet is my little treasure, it's her.
Oh, that's so nice.
That's so lovely.
But, I never debriefed her. She was 5 years old when I had this reunion, and I've never debriefed her, and I've got to get to do that.
Yeah.
We've got to have a talk about it. And I didn't realise till now. She's in her 30s now. I didn't realise.
Yeah.
It all got swept under the rug. Basically, never happened, or we never.
Wow.
Whether we ever talk about this or whatever.
Well, it piles upon piles upon piles of You know, there's the event, but then there's also the guilt, what you were told, what you weren't told, what people knew, which you didn't know, you know, and a lot of the time, there's so many moving parts to it as well.
Aren't there?
Yeah.
Do you
And if I can just say, there's another generation to this.
Oh,
so there's, so there's my other children.
Yes.
Okay. Then there's the children of adoptees who are affected by this.
Yeah.
And we could go into this.
Yes.
There's all this knock-on effect coming down through the generations. And then even probably grandkids. In fact, I know one grandkid, my cousin's stolen daughter, her son. He's contacting me all the time, trying to get, how do I find out this? How do I find out that? He's the grandchild of my cousin. And he's trying to get all this information. I want to know because he keeps, if he wants to, do the family search, there's this full stop.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it's that intergenerational thing that every single person we have spoken to has raised.
Yeah, absolutely. Every single person.
Right.
Has raised.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. So there's this knock-on effect down the track. It never ends.
Thank you, Cameron, for your time.
Thank
it was an
you
amazing
so
story.
much.
And wonderful
my pleasure.
to hear from the male side as we started. We were talking about that, but also just, the like you said, the effect that continues.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. My pleasure, and thanks for having us on. And thanks for chasing the men's stories.
Of course.
Thank you. Thank you.
Cameron has also written Rebecca's Law, which is a novel loosely based on his experience losing his child to adoption. Join us next week, where another survivor will be sharing their experience of forced adoption. If you would like any more information about any of the issues raised in this podcast, or have an experience that you would like to share, contact Origins Australia on 0756 27 0565 or 0414 959 239. Or check out the website originsaustralia.org. For immediate support 24 hours a day, call Lifeline on 13 11 14.